Recording is on.
Welcome back to the Big Tree podcast with Adarsh. Today, we are going to talk about the World Test Championship final as it happened and then preview the India England Test series. So, on the final itself, here are my thoughts on it. I feel like at the start of it, at least, there were two major things which went against South Africa. The first of which was obviously the non-review of Bo Webster, and then after that, the session in which they kept on bowling outside the off stump and short lengths. I think if they had been a little tighter at that stage, then they'd have given at least 60 runs less than what they had eventually. Then on to their batting in the second innings, on the first innings, sorry. You have the genius that is Stark that came to the fore, and I think again like if you look at the third innings batting, and I think this is where actually, or sorry, the third innings batting of Australia, I think this is where actually the game turned, if not for the final partnership, one must say. Um, I'd say that the bowling, which KG, a lot of the fact that the weather played its part as well. I mean, you have to acknowledge the fact that the weather did play its part. But to me, the fact that 100 runs were scored for the loss of only 2 wickets, the last 2 wickets, is astounding for a team which is playing the World Test Championship final. But still, they had only 282 to chase, and while it felt like a long way away because of the way the match had unfolded, that till that point, it was quite clear, right? You have people like Stark and Hazelwood being able to score whatever 100 runs together, then that essentially means that you're going to be able to at least make something out of the target at the end. And then obviously, quite obviously, I think South Africa were very ruthless, especially Markram and Bavuma. I mean, I was fuming at the fact that they were not trying to finish it on the third day itself, but as it turned out, they were right, and they eventually finished it on nearly the end of the first session of day four. I mean, that is that is quite something because that test should have ideally ended by the start of day four at worst. But regardless, I mean, quite a lot of things to discuss there. I first of all would like to congratulate South Africa for whatever they've done. I mean, it has to be the year where rain has showered upon all the places which had drought for so many years. I mean, RCB, South Africa, Newcastle, PSG, Crystal Palace. I mean, the list goes on and on. But sticking to our main protagonist here, I think for South Africa, it was for a long time coming. You look at the 2023 World Cup, they were till the league stages the second best team in the tournament after India. You look at the 2024 T20 World Cup, they had their hands on the trophy before they did something which they're quite infamous of. 1999, I mean, there are so many situations and equations which they've been by themselves or by the nature of the sport itself gotten on the wrong side of. And finally, that they've got their hands on the silverware, I'd like to congratulate them. And it was so great the fact that they had people like Dale Steyn, AB de Villiers, Graham Smith, all these people on the ground. I mean, I wish they had Jack Callis as well. I mean, for a country so rich in sporting history, it only makes sense that finally they're able to put a ring on that. I mean, I would personally go as far as to say they've been the greatest pace bowling nation in the history of the sport. You have Alan Donald, Makaya Antini, Kagiso Rabada, Morne Morkel, Vernon Philander. I mean, the list can go on and on. Marco Janssen is there. You have people on the fringes who'll get into the main sides of everyone else's. And it's not like I'm not saying that they've had periods where they've been the best, but the sustained quality of consistent fast bowling has not been matched by any other side around the world. You look at Australia or in England, for example. Australia has had periods where they've not had many a group of fast bowlers who are performing at the elite level. Whereas if you look at South Africa, they've always had a group of fast bowlers performing at an elite level. So yeah, I think um, a lot of congratulations to them. And for Australia's part, I mean, there are quite a lot of things to look at as well. I mean, if you look at Khawaja, for example, I really did not see the point of playing him over a Sam Constas. he scored a pair. I mean, I'm not saying this with the benefit of hindsight. I mean, even before the game, I had Constance and Labuschagne opening for me, because in that morning against Rabada, there is absolutely no use to defending for 45 balls and scoring not a run. You have to try and do something. And even if Constas would have gotten out in the second innings, he might have scored a 30 or a 40. And that would have staved off crucial balls which someone like a Steve Smith or Manas Labuschagne or someone like a Travis Head could have feasted on when the pitch had gotten flatter. So these are all little elements which play into themselves. And while I'm not dissing Khawaja, he's been a wonderful player for Australia, but I really, really think his time is over. And just playing him for the sake of sentiment in the World Test Championship final makes no sense to me. And with Labuschagne, I feel like he's going too much inside of his bubble. I really don't think that it's an issue of technique or an issue of form or anything else. I just think that he's not confident enough. If you look at how he played before this rut he's gotten himself into, he wasn't a very he was never like a Rishabh Pant or a Ben Duckett, for example, or a Jamie Smith, but he was always the kind of player who would at least be rotating the ball, not quite a Joe Root even, but somewhere near that, where he'd never be bogged down. He'd always wanted to do something on the crease. Now it almost seems like he's compensating for his lack of scoring ability or his lack of intent by fidgeting around too much around the crease. And that is something which has to be changed by himself, or someone has to go and give him that nod, because no matter how many balls he practices, unless he's able to have that intent of at least trying to make an impact on the game rather than just trying to survive, he's not going to be able to replicate the version of himself that he was before this. And people are calling out Hazelwood for having an off game. I really, really don't think that that's fair on him, because um, for the first innings, he obviously had Stark who delivered, and it was not necessary for him to be at that level. You can have one bad game, and in the second innings, the pitch was flat. He did whatever he could have. I don't really think this is too much of a point to drive home. Apart from that, Lion, I mean, you can say it was kind of disappointing of him to not get a wicket in the second innings with the amount of turn he was getting. But again, people can have an off day. Just let them be for a while. Um, Steve Smith again, like I just saw a shot of him where Rabada bowled and the ball angled away, and he was able to connect it with his immaculate hand-eye coordination. I mean, it is beyond belief the amount of movement that he can counter just by instinct, reflexive, and perceptory reaction to a ball, and it is astounding, without any foot movement, without any real coordination of the entire body. That that speaks to the fact that it's still there. We had thought for the past 12 months or something before the obviously scoring those centuries against India that he lost that hand-eye coordination, but clearly not. And he shouldn't, honestly. I feel he's the greatest test batsman in the history of cricket after Donald Bradman. I know a lot of people will be debating that, but his numbers, everything speak for themselves. Regardless, that is probably all of what I had dissecting about Australia. Yeah, I really don't think that Green should be thought much into. I think he needs a bit more experience. He was clearly playing at the ball with hard hands. Okay, so now on to the India versus England Test series. Now, what I would have wanted, obviously, is for an England to play Jacob Bethel at number three and not play Pope. That would have been my instinct, and that is the first thing which strikes to me just at the inspection of the first lineup, because how I see it, Jacob Bethel ranks as the best young talent in England at this present moment, even so, superseding Harry Brook. If you look at him play, I mean, I looked at him in the IPL, and his shot selection, his ability to field, and he can always give you some overs. So I just think that the amount of depth he brings and the variety he brings, the versatility he brings, and just the sheer level of raw talent is nowhere near anyone in English cricket. And I'd like to give kudos to um, Baz and Stokes for that, because we've been drilling them hard for the past 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever amount of months for having rogue selections and whatever, but they've really, really created someone or brought someone into the fore quicker than what they'd have been originally, purely on the basis of their instincts. And yeah, they've been right this time. Not so much with some other players, which I'm going to come on to. I feel like Bashir again is just not what they're thinking him to be. He is at best someone who's going to do a holding job. That is the max he can do. And if you got a really, really ragging wicket, he'll probably get some wickets. And that is something which even I could do if I bowled overarm in Indian spinning pitches. You have to have a spinner who can actually be consistent with his line and length and vary his line and length and according to the conditions, and have different balls up his arsenal, which he does not seem to have. I really do not see what the England camp is seeing of him, and I think he is a failed investment in all ways. They're just trying to bank on him even further, despite him not delivering the goods. I feel Dawson should have played. I mean, it's as simple as that for me. And at the top of the order, I feel that Crawley is fine. I genuinely think of Crawley as being overly dissed. I think he can still be kept in the side. Pope, you cannot keep someone on the basis of a Zimbabwe Test performance, can you? Apart from that, England's bowling lineup does look a bit thin. I mean, you don't have a Broad or Anderson or even a Archer at this point. You just have people like Tung, Cars, and Vokes, etc. It all really depends on whether they prepared a seaming pitch or a flat track. If it's a flat track, then they're going to be enough for a world of trouble, especially without a Mohammad Shami, which would have been made it an even more equal contest in a seaming pitch. Apart from that, I think that England aren't going in with the worst of chances, but they could have been bolstered by one or two better selections. With regards to India, I again would have made a. I was in doubt as to what my lineup would have been. Obviously, the top seven kind of clears itself. I would have Rahul and Jaswal opening with Sai Sudarshan at number three, and then you could have Gill at four, and then I'd have originally thought of playing Nair at five, um, Rishabh Pant at six, and then you could have one of Jadeja or Nitish Reddy, depending on the conditions. And then at number eight, if you did choose to go in with a Nitish Reddy, sorry, Jadeja, then at number eight, you could have decided between a Nitish Reddy or a Kuldeep Yadav or a Shardul Thakur, depending on the type of combination you want to go in with. And then you have Bumrah, and I would choose two of Siraj, Arshdeep, and Prasid. I don't think Siraj is as much of a given as people are making him out to be, but I'd still start with him, and then you could choose between one of Arshdeep and Prasid. The main, like, I think the weakness in this lineup is quite palpable, and everyone understands it. They're not as experienced as the previous lineups, but for me, it really depends on whether they're able to pick up 20 wickets, because the batting, while it's not very strong, I am not sure of how they're going to pick up 20 wickets without Bumrah having a Bumrah game every single game that he plays. That's what came to the fore in Australia. Even on such helpful wickets, you had to go in with a combination of three spinners and part-time bowlers just to offload the workload from Bumrah. But you cannot have important bowling options to substitute for a potent bowling option to try and take off the workload. You have to have a degree of semblance of some kind of an attacking bowling lineup or a potent bowling lineup, even without your spearhead bowling. And I am not sure that uh, the first change bowling options or the second change bowling options are going to be nearly as potent as what a Bumrah is. And it really depends on how a Gill is able to marshal his troops. Because, and this is why I keep on going back to how great a captain Virat was. And I'm not trying, and I know I speak from a biased perspective, but for him to do what he was able to do with the resources that he had is spectacular. Because he had players like Umesh Yadav, Mohammad Shami, who was not nearly at his best, Ishant Sharma, past his best, and he conjured them up into a potent bowling lineup. And I think that is the challenge that lies ahead for a Shubman Gill after the disastrous run by Rohit Sharma, is to conjure up a bowling lineup, a pace bowling lineup that is to be reckoned with backup options rather than just one player dictating all of it. In the batting front, I think if it's a flat track, they're okay, but obviously, but what's really going to be a challenge is to see how Sai Sudarshan fares. I'm quite okay with the opening combination India has, but how a Sai Sudarshan fares, how a Karun Nair fares, I'm really not too sure on Karun Nair. If I'm being honest, I you could actually make a case for not playing, and you could have someone like a Jadeja at number 6 and Nitish Reddy at number 7, a Shardul Thakur at number 8 with oblique Kuldeep Yadav. You could do something like that even. But those are the kind of areas which I'm doubting in. India, I think, heavily relies on quite obviously the performance of Bumrah. But apart from that, I think they rely on the performance of a Rishabh Pant, a Rahul, a Jaiswal. Because apart from that, you have some people like Gill and Sudarshan, and you have people like Reddy and Jadeja who are not tangibles in your performance. They will give you something, but you're not sure what they're going to give to you. And also in the bowling front, I think they're heavily dependent on how Siraj fares, because if a Siraj does even decently well, even if it does what he did in Australia, then you have the scope that if the third bowler delivers 70% of what Siraj does, and then the fourth and fifth bowlers can do 50% of that, then you have something to reckon with and something to at least have a scope of going at it with, 20, going at the target of 20 wickets. How I look at it at this point, I think that the best result India can achieve is 3-1 victory to England, because of the fact that I don't think they're as good enough to compete at this point, because of the fact that they're in transition. My highest run scorer in this series would have to be Joe Root, I think, and the highest wicket taker I'd put in, um, probably a Gus. I don't think Atkinson's playing right. I'd probably put in Bumrah to be the highest wicket taker, despite him only playing 3 tests. For the first test, it seems like it's a green track which will get slow, so it depends on who wins the toss first. Really not quite predictable for the first test, but I'll keep my stick with my prediction of 3-1. That is probably it for this episode of the Big Three podcast. We'll see you after the first test, reviewing it how it has fared. Till then, see you again. Cheers.